It is now 3:37 p.m. I hereby call the Blight and Illegal Dumping Task Force to order. Ms. Crichton, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Present.
Director Davis.
Present. Present.
Erica Taylor.
Here.
Sarah Harris.
Here.
Director Zena.
Here.
Deputy Director Tuliadis.
Here.
Ms. White.
Present.
Ms. Neal.
Present.
Mr. Witter.
Present.
Ms. Boscarino.
Present.
Mr. White.
Present.
And Ms. Shaw. And Chairwoman Logan.
Present. Thank you so much for that. And welcome everyone to the last February meeting and of the Blight and Illegal Dumping Task Force. I just want to say, for those, no one's in here, but just in case someone comes in, agendas are up at the front. And we do not allow public comment, even though it is a public meeting. There is no public comment during this meeting. Only those that are recognized by the task force will be allowed to provide comments to the task force. Before we begin, a quick comment to senior leadership here. At the December 20th meeting, the City Council passed a resolution accepting the short-term recommendation of this task force. Phase 2 had a target completion date of February 7th. So much has happened though. We created a most wanted litter bandits website and accompanying social media pages to record do you know hold messages for 311. Those are a couple of things that are still outstanding. I'll be requesting an update on the implementation of these initiatives by the administration at the next City Council meeting on Tuesday, March 7th. All right, we have 3 items on the agenda. Item number 1 is a continued discussion of our research projects. Item number 2 is a discussion. There are a few constituent questions my office received, and we've going to review those today. And item number 3 is an add-on. We have completed our review of the research project, and I'd like to have a discussion and get your input on what items we want to bring forward to council for recommendation. So we'll go back to item number 1 and begin with the research discussion and research projects. The first one being communication and outreach from Melanie Neal, and I so appreciate your patience. I think you were supposed to be on the first presentation, but all of these, we appreciate your patience. Thank you. And while you're getting in position, I just want to say, I know we have covered a lot of information. We have a lot of ideas on the table. You all have just brought forth some amazing recommendations, observations, information, and our work is very important. As you all are driving throughout the city, I'm sure you see more and more each day the need for this task force and the areas in which we're bringing forth. And I really appreciate you all being very candid and open and forthright with the information and doing your research and coming forth with some information that you've really put time into. I know it takes time for research, and I appreciate it. The citizens appreciate it. The city of Memphis appreciates it. And so we're going to move forward with some great recommendations. As I reflect back, I was reflecting back on our public safety task force, and who knew that a year or 2 years down the road, we'd have to pull that back out because some of the things that we recommended were quite pertinent at that time. And so don't take this lightly. The time that you're spending here is very, very important. We cannot continue to let our city be under siege as it relates to blight and illegal dumping. We have generations coming behind us, and the work that we're doing today is going to determine what type of city they will live in tomorrow. And so the work you're doing, the time you're investing here is very important and greatly appreciated by myself as well as my colleagues on the council as well. And I'm sure Councilwoman Johnson can attest to that. We appreciate having the collaborative effort that we have here. So thank you. You go right ahead, Mr. Melanie.
Good afternoon. As Councilwoman Logan mentioned, I was asked some time ago to, I guess, think about the concept of communication as it relates to our efforts on this task force and beyond this task force. So I will get started. Apparently, I don't know how to work the computer. The one to the, this, yeah, let's see if I need to push it harder. I'm sorry. Nope, it didn't work for me. I knew it wasn't me. Okay, thank you. Okay, I looked at just some quick key questions and considerations that are surrounding Blight and just conversations that I think we as the task force should continue beyond these meetings. Who and what contributes to Blight and dumping and why? What is the nature and extent of Blight? What types of Blight exist where? What resources are available to deter or mitigate Blight? And how do we change behavior? And as I thought about what leads to Blight, these were some considerations that I kind of thought through. Some of the questions that we in code enforcement and neighborhood improvement hear quite often, some of the answers, some of the excuses that we hear as to why property owners and tenants do not take responsibility for their properties. I believe there is a lack of education. What should I do? Who should I call? What is government actually responsible for? What is the penalty? What are feasible, manageable expectations for citizens? How can we promote engagement or awareness and involvement? What audiences should be the focus for education? What type of education is most effective? And I believe these are conversations that as we move past these task force meetings, we have to continue to foster with all of us sitting on this task force and those of us that work together on a daily basis. There's also a lack of responsibility. There are out-of-town owners that have never been to Memphis. They don't care about Memphis. They feel that there's no recourse, so why should I come into compliance? The city will just do it and I won't have to, so why bother? It's cheaper for the city to take care of my property than it is for me to take care of my property. These are things that we hear all the time. If I appear in court, I won't be held accountable. So why go? And these, again, are questions or concerns or feedback or answers that we definitely hear on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure many of you do. There's also a lack of resources. There's a large subset of our population that just does not have the money to come into compliance. They don't have the resources to come into compliance. So how do we, identify resources? How do we work together to understand what's out there? What areas have money to fight blight? What areas have affordable housing? I think that we in code enforcement and neighborhood improvement, that's key information that if we have it, very many times that would assist our inspectors in providing those resources, those answers to our citizens. Some of the key partnerships that I think are very important to continue to grow and develop, and this isn't by any means an exhaustive list, but this is just, some of the key partnerships that I thought, that very many of us are represented at this table. City and county, definitely. City departments such as Public Works, Solid Waste, PSC, Fire, Police, Performance Management, HCD, and I believe that sharing our internal efforts, educating each other. We as a city, we need to make sure that we understand what each department is responsible for. I believe there's still some gray there. And this is internal. So how can we educate externally if we still have a ways to go internally? Sharing data. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of efforts that are ongoing. And oftentimes, I don't think we do the best job of sharing that, even internally. Collective efforts, making sure that our resources are identified, making sure that we're working with a common goal. If certain projects are going on in certain areas. We in code enforcement need to know about that. We need to understand, like I said, if there are resources for citizens, if there are projects that are ongoing, if there's research, if there, is federal funding out there that HCD may be able to offer, we need to understand and know that information to be able to share it. Key partnerships that I also thought about were BAM and other nonprofits, our department, neighborhood improvement, strategic code enforcement, meaning that, again, if there are certain resources or certain money available for, say, demolition in a certain area, or board ups in a certain area, or cutting grass in a certain area, I think that we can focus our data and share that information so that we're overlapping. Our work is overlapping. If we understand that there's a certain district or sub-district in the city that has a greater number of properties that are vacant, a greater number of properties that are actually qualifying for demolition, and there are resources to do that, then we need to do a better job of sharing that information. Of course, the city and environmental court, we are working to implement our fee schedule for the IPMC. So just understanding penalties, understanding what accountability is actually out there for holding tenants and citizens and property owners responsible for maintaining their properties. Memphis City Beautiful. And of course, our school system. There's always room for youth education. There's room for education at all levels, I feel. I have a 9-year-old, so I'm big on the youth education because he's one that's telling me, Mom, you need to clean up the city. You need to cut the grass. I'm like, I wish I could do it all. But, just appealing to kids at that age, it grows with them, and they're able to, hold us accountable and keep us on our toes. The police joint association meetings, the neighborhood associations, churches, city government, and public and private sector. It takes all of us being involved, sharing data, understanding what the problem is, and hopefully working together to find a solution. Some of the key data that I thought about is important as far as us being the gatekeepers of that data and being more than willing to share that with our stakeholders and our co-workers and our agency partners. The number of vacant properties, what does that look like? Code enforcement data, environmental court data, just understanding the neighborhood demographics. What's the median income? How many properties are actually rental properties? How many are owned? The number of rental properties, I think I said that twice, that's very important. Chronic offenders. Property owners that own multiple properties throughout the city. What does that look like? Those who have been in environmental court various times for the same types of violations, what does that data look like? That's key for us finding a solution. Crime data, working with MPD to ensure that we understand that piece. Environmental enforcement, I know Director is set to talk, I believe, next council meeting about environmental enforcement, the number of cases, the illegal dumping cameras, the location of chronic dump sites, and just that information that's being identified by that particular department. As I mentioned earlier, programs that provide resources for seniors and the associated guidelines to qualify. There are programs out there, but we need to understand how to advise a citizen to qualify. Is it you have to own your property? Is it based, tenant or rental based? Is it income based? Is it age based? So these are parameters that we need to understand to be able to share information. Our long-term goal: to develop a comprehensive, ongoing strategy for communication in order to continue to increase communication between key stakeholders, to share specific goals and determine how goals can be aligned and become a collaborative effort. We need to understand where the work is, what's going on with each of our departments, each of our agencies, so that we can work together. We can actually see a difference when efforts are centralized, when we're actually working towards a common goal. We're able to visibly see that more so than one area working in one particular council district, one department working somewhere else. It just helps when we collaborate on our end goal. Sharing data to create a shared vision through quantifiable goals, actually setting goals, setting timelines, setting benchmarks, checking in with each other to make sure that we're reaching key. If we say in 2 months we're going to do X, Y, Z, we need to follow up in 2 months to actually make sure we're on target to get things done. effectively understand and utilize and share information related to existing resources. I think it's so key to tell our story. There's a lot of good work that's going on. I think oftentimes we just don't know. We oftentimes work in silos. So some of the good work Inspector Witter was telling me about, some of the offenders that we've caught and worked with MPD and now working with MFD on just things that we can put into place to make sure that we can collaborate and work together. Focus on strategies to address blight in areas where they're most appropriate. What's the need in Council District 3? What's the need in Council District 7? What's the need in Council District 1? I think that everybody knows that the demographics, the housing stock in different areas of the city differs. So how do we appeal to what's going on in each of our council districts? And clearly identify action steps for all key stakeholders. Not just talking, not just having monthly meetings, but actually having action items that we follow up on. And again, check in to make sure that we're making progress. And I thought I'd end with just this statement. When we all communicate and share information to provide answers to the whys and the whos, we can collectively eliminate the problems associated with blight in our city.
Absolutely.
And that's all I have.
Awesome. I think at this point I'm going to pass the collection plate around because the message has been gone forth. This is so powerful. I really appreciate it, and it really speaks to everything that I've thought as well. I appreciate you articulating this, and if we can start assigning and this right here and moving forward with that, I think we can, like you said, have the metrics and people in place to do it. We can make some leeway. So we're going to definitely keep this one right here so we can pull from it for moving it forward. I'm going to leave it right here until after all the presentations today, and then we'll go forth. Are there any questions, comments? Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and go through all of the presentations because we all get to talking and our juices get to flowing and we're also passionate and then time will be gone. So thank you, Director Neal, for that. We're going to go through the presentation, then we'll come back around. Next, we have informational pamphlets and other communication approaches by Mr. Telly White. If you would come on down.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, you covered everything I was going to do.
Basically, yeah.
So, I guess I won't be before you long.
You don't have to be.
This conversation pretty much came up when we were talking about. Oh, okay, it's on. Okay. When we were talking about putting the pamphlets in the MLG and W forms, and I sat there and I would go out and I would ask people, I'd be like, hey, do you look inside your MLG and W? And they're like, nah. So I'm like, well, print those out wouldn't make no sense. So, and then I was looking at when I think that was Director Connect, when he came in, he had the posters. And we was talking about the illegal dumping sites, and we had the posters. The poster looks excellent. But I'm pretty sure we had to pay to get those posters done. So I was trying to think more of a way that we can get this message out without spending much money towards that. And so while we were talking, I was thinking, like, why would we put it in the MLG and W bill? Why can't we run ads on the MLG and W app? Like, I'm pretty sure if you guys watch YouTube, like when you cut on the YouTube, an ad run and you can't do anything until that ad goes by. So we know the problem areas. We understand the problem areas. If not, we can get with Code, and Code will be able to tell us the problem areas with blight. Now, the issue is, how do we get it to the constituents? Well, GEO. I didn't know about it. My sister ended up telling me about it. So, you can ride past an area and it can drop text messages in phones. I don't know too much about it. That's why I'm bringing it to the board. So the task force, so some of you guys, y'all may know something about it. But it can drop text messages to those people that stays in that area, or if your phone is in that area, and it can run all the things that we have been talking about in the meeting. In these meetings, when we talked about getting rid of where to dump mattresses at, where to dump toilets at, where to dump oil, where to dump these items at. And so that was one of the things I was like, man, why we can't do that? We don't have to put them, the GO don't have to go in all areas. It can just go to the problem areas where we're at. Another thing I was thinking about, and this is just me talking to younger people as well. Another thing I was thinking about, influencers. I didn't understand the influence thing. I don't understand it. But influencers have a lot to do with it. And people, when you first think about influencer, people think about some of these rappers. Well, we not rappers. No. It's just some regular people that can be an influence. Be like, hey, do you know where to actually dump this at? Well, let me tell you. And that's a 20 to 30 second pitch right there. And we know that everybody right now, even the older generation, ourselves, myself, we're microwave thinkers. We are microwave thinkers. Like if it don't catch us within the first 10 seconds, our mind kind of flow on by it. So another thing I was thinking about on this, while I was asking some of the younger people, like our solid waste trucks, our city vehicles, all vehicles that's owned by the city. And I ain't saying that all of them have to be done well, or even code enforcement. Why we can't put the QR code on there? Like, that is much cheaper to put the QR code on the vehicle, where you can snap and it can automatically drop to you to tell you where to put some of this stuff at. Or if we have to put it on the vehicle, that actually be in that area that is doing the cleaning, which is, of course, code, PSC, solid waste. Solid waste has to hit every area in the city. Every area in the city, good, bad, indifferent, it goes to them. Why we can't put just a QR code on there, and if somebody have something that needs to be, boom, it can lead them to what can be done. Some of the videos, or just where some of the stuff can be dumped in. Know the audience that we going for. That's when we just know the area. And of course, when you go on to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, all that, the content has to catch you. I don't know how to do it. That's why I'm jogging here. But it has to catch so we can understand. I didn't even understand it. You mentioned your 9-year-old. Well, of course, I got kids. I got to make sure they mine. But I got some, and they be with me, and they be like, hey, you see the couch right there? I'd be like, yeah, I see it. Which, it didn't bother me at first. When I used to ride around the city, I would see couches. I would see this stuff. And it didn't bother me. But now that I'm in it, I'm like, wow. So we just put a couch right there. It was a couch at Mapco right here on Poplar. It was just sitting right there in the driveway. And I was just like, so somebody just drove up and just put a couch right there. That's what happened. And so, and now I notice it a whole lot more now. But the QR code is just a way to save money. Instead of printing this up, let's drop it on the smartphone real quick. And then you say, well, what about the elders? Because the elders are really the ones that actually care about it. Okay? You guys had to help me with that one. I don't know, because we'll say, hey, tell them to do 311. And then the first thing I get back, and I get some feedback, I did it, nobody responded to me. I don't know how to fix it. I'm not saying the 311 is bad. I'm saying that's what the feedback will come back. And so, making the QR codes. I got some of this off of, I went and I researched the Blight, how other cities would do it. And I found Fight Blight Be More, which is in Baltimore. And I actually called up there because I wanted to see how they were doing. And those were most of the ideas that they were saying, because like Baltimore, at one point they were saying they had a real bad area where it was a lot of rentals. It was a lot of people that was out-of-town investors, and they tried to figure out a way to make people actually care. Well, what do most people care about? Money. They care about money. So they went about it as saying that, hey, we keep this area clean, we can be able to bring up the value of these homes. We bring up the value of these homes, then we'll have people that want to come in here. We have people that want to come in here. If you want to sell and leave, you can sell and leave, but you will get a profit out of it. So that's the approach that the person that I was speaking with took it in Bmore and said that, and it kind of just started around. They got the attention of the Baltimore Ravens, and they started helping out with these projects. So that was, hold on, we got one more. And you kind of touched on this about identifying and reporting and analyzing where the problem areas is, and then the support team on it. Like, I understand when people get frustrated when they say, hey, I called, and nothing get done. Like, I don't know how to hold more people accountable on things like that. I don't know. But I do know when a concerned person calls in, at least some type of feedback needs to go to them. Like, hey, we came to the area. We looked at it. We see the pictures. We own it. Something needs to go back to them. But I don't know. I'm not trying to step on nobody's toe. There was just a conversation me, Councilman Logan, we was having it, and it was just I was thinking, while we printing out posters and we putting this up, I think if we can go more of a smartphone way, more of a way the social media way, I think that'll help save some money, and we can put money back into getting some of these issues addressed.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. It's out of the box, a little bit different from what we've done, but it'll reach the target audience, those
Correct.
that seemingly don't respond to 311. They don't respond to anything else. I think that is one group or demographic that we're missing, and that would catch them. So I think that's some great information, especially millennials and, sometimes in different communities, you need different ways to reach them. So thank you so much for that. And that was Fight Blight Be More?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Be More. Awesome. All right, and hopefully you all are jotting down comments and questions, and you can come back to that. Next, we'll have review of Adopt a Can and other adopt programs by, Okay, that's Director White. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm on. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eldra White. I manage the Office of Memphis City Beautiful. I'm here to highlight adoption programs. Essentially, adoption programs or adopter programs allow volunteers to take on the stewardship and care of public spaces and resources. These programs are pretty popular, and they can be found locally, nationally, and internationally. Some examples here locally: we operate the Adopt a Trash Can program, Adopt a Park, And then Public Works, the Stormwater Department actually has an Adopt a Storm Drain program. And the city also has Adopt a Block, which is somewhat dormant, and I'll explain that later. And then the state has the Adopt a Highway program. TDOT runs that program. Some urban cities have Adopt a Lot programs, allowing people to adopt city-owned vacant lots for the purpose of basically maintaining and beautifying them. Adoption programs are valuable. They provide support and care for public spaces. They offer great volunteer experiences for the participants. They provide positive total outcomes and metrics. For example, our Adopt a Park program, the participants actually collect hundreds of bags of trash each year from parks. Adoption programs leverage the power of the volunteer in their time by giving a focused goal to the individuals and groups interested in community improvement. They reduce litter and blight and encouraging the use and maintenance of public spaces. They provide a visible example of citizen engagement, which also inspires others to join. So our Adopt a programs here locally, like I said, we manage the Adopt a Park program. We were charged in 2016 by the Mayor Strickland. So we developed it and we're working on that program in cooperation with the Parks Division. Currently we have 57 parks that have been adopted by various groups and individuals, and they simply work to keep the park clean and litter-free, and they serve as the eyes and ears for each park that they've adopted. The adopters get signage stating that they're adopters, and it's been pretty popular for us. We have adopters in and out. Some people say they can do it, for a couple of years, and some move on, that kind of thing. So the numbers change annually. We also have Adopt a Trash Can, which was created by Memphis City Beautiful with funds provided actually by the City Council for the placement of public trash receptacles. So we thought of the notion of actually having neighborhood groups adopt those cans. And currently, neighborhood associations can adopt up to 5 trash cans from us and have them placed in their communities, and they service them. So currently we have 73 receptacles placed, and they're adopted by 18 neighborhood associations and nonprofits. And as I mentioned earlier, Adopt a Storm Drain is actually a program to help generate awareness for the importance of keeping debris and chemicals out of the drains. And then there's Adopt a Block, which was carved out a few years ago by a special committee and former Deputy COO Patrice Thomas. And it has been housed with the Office of Community Affairs with our support, but currently it's inactive, and Memphis City Beautiful would like to resurrect it and actually transform it and make it Adopt a Street. So why Adopt a Street? We just feel that more people will buy into the notion of adopting a street versus an entire block. The blocks in Memphis are pretty huge, so we think we'll get better buy-in and have people easy. They'll be easy to claim and manage. So if you'll see the pictures here noted, these are some of our happy adopters. They really enjoy the notion of maintaining their parks, and it's been well received. Next set of photos, Adopt a Trash Can, same here. It's been pretty popular but amongst the neighborhood groups. We have a goal of 100 trash cans to have adopted. So far, 73 cans have been adopted. We're waiting to install 27. We have 14 groups on the waiting list, actually. So we're hoping to get funds to purchase an additional 50 cans. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we want to retool the Adopt a Block program so that it becomes Adopt a Street with hopes of getting better participation and interest from the community. As far as recommendations go, As I mentioned, we would like to have Adopt a Street versus Adopt a Block. Nashville actually has an Adopt a Street program. And then lastly, we would like to have additional monies to purchase cans so that we can satisfy that waiting list that we have out there. So that's essentially it. Those are the highlights.
Just for clarification, while people contemplate or process the information, what is keeping you from just changing it to Adopt a Street from Adopt the Block if it's a program that you own?
Well, we don't own it necessarily, but the Office of Community Affairs had it. So we're in the talks with the Communications Department to actually have it come to us. And we're working with them on that possibility.
Okay.
So there's nothing stopping us, really.
Okay.
So we just have to, work with the Communications Department to help retool it, actually, and build a new website and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And they're going to help us promote it.
All right. So it's going to happen per se. You're just in negotiations. There's nothing like the council can do or anyone else can do. It's just
Right.
the management. Okay.
Right.
Great. That's good.
So my team is willing and ready to take it over. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for that. I had a couple of other questions, but I'll wait until we roll back
Okay.
around.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, Director Davis is going to come back and revisit solid waste fees and billing. We kind of had to rush through it the last time. And then last but not least, we'll end this presentation with a discussion on restructuring code enforcement. We have a guest singer here today that's going to help with that discussion.
It's not gonna mess anything up, is it? Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so again, Philip Davis, Solid Waste, still getting used to that, Director. So just going to go over some numbers. There are going to be a lot of numbers here because that's kind of what dollars and work break down to. So solid waste collections is made up of currently about 176,000 routed customers. About 172,000 of them are residential, 4,000 of them are commercial. In 2022, we collected about 410,000 tons of solid waste. About 231,000 tons of that was MSW. That's what's in your green garbage cart. That's municipal solid waste. And about 179,000 tons was bulk waste. Interesting note that since 2016, that bulk waste number has gone from around 59,000 tons to 179,000 tons with our new collection model. In 2022, vehicle usage, we have about 244 vehicles in operations, and we drove about 1.57 million miles in 2022. Current fees, residential single cart base rate for single family residential homes, $29.96 per month. We do have small commercial customers, as 4,000 or so commercial customers discussed earlier. They start out on a 2-cart base rate of $79.64 $79.64 per month. Our annual revenue this year is projected to be about $76.9 million. About $68.2 million of it come from residential, and only about $8.7 million of it is coming from those small commercial customers. Our FY23 expenditures, we budgeted $77.5 million. We are projecting to spend $84.1 million. So there's been discussion about parcel-based fees. So I'm going to talk about some numbers that I will go on and say I am not the expert in the area of parcels. Our current fee structure is based on meters, what's billed to MLGW customers on their utility meters. But since there's been discussion, research I've done, there are about 245,000 total parcels in Memphis. About 211,000 of them have a structure on them. About 34,000 of them are vacant. Of those 245,000 total parcels, about 208,000 of them are residential. And when I say residential, I'm going to qualify that as non-multifamily residential properties. About 190,000 of them have a structure on them. About 18,000 of them do not. Of the 208,000 residential properties, of course, we currently serve about 172,000 of them. Approximately 36,000 of them are unserviced residential properties. I'm trying to drive to this 36,000 because in previous discussions, it's appeared that one of the pressure points are these residential properties that are in neighborhoods that are either vacant or not serviced by the solid waste division because they don't have a utility meter and haven't been paying in to the service. So adding these 36,000 parcels to collection, currently we're projecting right now approximately $35.86 per location cost per month to service a location. So if I added those 36,000 parcels that are currently not paying in, that would be an additional $15.5 million per year in cost. So here's some limitations to this. Were we to start servicing these locations, still we would only be collecting what's in the public right of way. So these parcels that are unoccupied and vacant would still have a problem behind the sidewalk up onto the property because solid waste does not go on private property. We would still rely on the enforcement of those blighted properties by the existing infrastructure or whatever infrastructure is in place, entities that are in place to take care of that. Personnel and equipment would be needed, but it would need to be determined once we route these parcels because they are not currently routed. There may be in some cases some efficiencies we could, because we're already driving by some. In other cases, they may be that we may have to split routes because there's more unrouted parcels on routes, and so we would have to break down routes to add those unoccupied residential parcels. Also, disposal volume and costs. It's really difficult, impossible to project what those disposal volumes and costs would be because there's no identified use for the property. So I don't know what to expect at the property week to week. So that cost is really just kind of in the ether right now. Also, I got a little asterisk next to that $15.5 million a year. This cost does not include the initial equipment purchase costs or the lead time to hire sufficient personnel. And just so you know, we have 5 areas in the city, so the 172,000 customers that we service. We've got 5 areas of the city. They're approximately equal size. Those areas run between 34 and 36,000 stops, locations serviced in each area. So this would be essentially adding a 6th area of service to the city. That's what I got. A lot of numbers. Sorry about that.
For clarity's sake, on the 15 million, what did you say that figure was? 15,492,000.
So right now, we're projecting, with our current run rate, our current spend for this year, we're projecting right now that's costing us about $35.86 per home, per stop, per month, to service. So that $15.492 million is basically 3586 times 12 months times 36,000. Because that's what our cost is per stop to service a stop right now. So there would be that would be the incremental increase in cost by increasing the service, and that would include like fuel, maintenance, disposal, but it doesn't include, and personnel, but it wouldn't include the initial startup cost. We'd have to acquire the equipment, so it's not the maintenance of it; it's the acquisition of the equipment, and of course the disposal volume. That disposal component of that may trend up, and the personnel costs may trend up because these would not be locations we would service with carts. We'd service it as bulk waste, and bulk waste is collected with our most expensive equipment and our most expensive personnel because it's loose, it's uncarted, so it's not as efficient to collect it.
Do you know how much more money you would get from those stops?
We would, well, I can do some back of the envelope.
Like that they would have to pay? And are those all residential, or are they businesses? And if they're businesses, would that be more money?
These would be all residential.
Single
This
family.
is residential. This is residential unoccupied property.
Okay.
This would not be any commercial.
Okay.
And this would be because what I was targeting was a pressure point that I'd perceived in previous discussions was we're driving by vacant lots and leaving stuff at the curb because they're not paying a fee, and this would be targeting those parcels in residential neighborhoods that are blighted but not receiving service.
Okay. But in terms of, go ahead.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Oh, okay. While he's looking at price of Councilwoman Johnson.
Okay, my question is, why did you come to 35? Did you not say that currently it's $29?
Yes, ma'am.
So how do we get to 35 for a vacant lot versus an occupied lot?
If you look at this, where I was in slide 3, our budgeted expenditures for FY23 is $77.5 million. Our projected expenditures are 84.1. That's the delta.
Are you saying that you're gonna come in and ask for an increase for those services for the other residential?
I'm gonna need to talk to council regarding my budget.
I understand. Okay.
I made a note of that on here too, to ask about
Now, wait
that.
a minute. Okay. I see that now, and I could go along with what the residential lots are for an average residential lot. But what about those situations like, let's think of Levi Road. You may have a 30-acre tract there. I think we may need to have a sliding scale here in those situations if we're going to actually start charging people for vacant lots. I don't know if we can charge the same thing for a vacant lot as we would for a regular lot, though. So we can get into a discussion.
Yes, ma'am. And the ordinance allows for fee collection based on projected volume generated by the customer.
Okay.
It's just when it's unoccupied and unused, it becomes difficult to project what's the weekly waste volume generated.
So we're gonna just have to start slow and work our way up. But I hate to start at the top and get all the complaints and nobody buys into the program. We
Yes.
do want people to understand that even though the lot is vacant, it's still a situation from a safety situation. you still want the lot to be protected. You want police. If the lot catch fire, you want the fire department to come. So they still need to be paying for services, even though the lot is vacant. And then the possibility of trash and things being placed on the lot in their absence. So I think we could definitely justify adding a fee to it, but I don't think we should be trying to get the same fee that the regular residential lot.
And I do believe that is a discussion with council, not with an E, not council.
I got
Yeah, for the lawyers, service fee versus taxing, what can be done with the funding, and what level of service can be provided, and at what levels, depending on the funding structure. And I just am not a lawyer.
I got you. I have another question. My concern still is commercial properties, apartments, trash cans are just overflowing with trash all the time when I pass by them, along with some of our department stores. Who is supposed to pick up those trash?
That the collection at commercial customers like that is performed by private haulers, and it's regulated, my understanding, through the Memphis Shelby County Health Department.
Health department.
The Memphis Shelby County Health Department.
Health department, not code enforcement, but the health department.
Code may have a component to it, but I believe that
We don't know.
dumpster ordinances, to my knowledge, are regulated under the health department.
Councilwoman, we are going to have another presentation that will hopefully address that somewhat, or once we open up for questions, someone here may be able to answer that. Thank you so much for that question and for the information. We appreciate the presentation, and we may have other questions as we come back around. The final discussion is on restructuring code enforcement. Myself and my colleagues and some constituents have been asked about creating a consolidated code enforcement similar to Memphis and Shelby County Division of Planning and Development and the Unified Development Code. So I'm not an expert on it, but we do have an expert here that has already gone through this process and can give us the ins and outs about it. And I definitely want to hear from everyone here regarding this, because the constituents, the city of Memphis, as Director Neal mentioned this morning, has stated that all of us, it's going to take everybody, citizens and everybody, but the citizens up to this point, since I've been on council, even before, there's been a lot of confusion and well, I'll just say confusion about 311. And we definitely want to have somewhere for the constituents to enter their complaints, but somehow there's a disconnect. And so if we're all going to be a part of the solution, we have to listen to the constituents in their complaints about 311 and the process. I'm not saying throw it out, but we're going to have to come up with a solution that is viable and that is easy for the constituents to use if we want everyone to be a part of the solution. So I did have some questions that were given to me, and then I'm going to ask Director Zena if he would come and share on this subject matter as well. Some of the questions or some of the comments, here's one. If not a city code, inspectors will close it. These are some of the just examples. If not a city code, inspectors will close out the complaint when they go, since it is not a violation for them, when in fact it is a county code violation, and this causes the issue to still go on unresolved in the law system. Just sharing some of the complaints that have led me to ask about considering a consolidation. Examples of county codes that shouldn't be routed to city departments: 18-wheeler cabs parked in a residential driveway, and any type of RV or hitch trailer, that's in a driveway or in front of setback, rental storage, pod, those types of things, overfilled or idle large size commercial dumpster. We're losing track of county code violations within the 311 system. They're going unresolved as city inspectors close them, and there's no violation found. These are just some of the areas that there's a gray area, and working with the partnership joint agencies, I see it all the time. And so I really just kind of wanted to hear the considerations for or cons for consolidating code. And so with that, before we get into a discussion, I did want to ask Director Zena to kind of just share his thoughts about it or presentation. Yes, go right ahead. You can go from here.
Okay, thank you. I didn't prepare a presentation, so sounds like I'm just shooting from the hip with my thoughts. I thought it'd be useful to first talk a little bit about our division and the sort of joint nature of it, and specifically the nature of the work that we do, because there are some pretty fundamental differences in what we do versus what city code enforcement does. So yes, we are a joint division of city and county government. Principally, the codes that we enforce for both the city of Memphis and for Shelby County are the Unified Development Code, which is our joint zoning and subdivision regulations. And then our technical building codes, which in layman's terms are the construction codes that one must follow when they're doing any type of construction in city of Memphis and unincorporated Shelby County. Those are jointly adopted by both the city council and the county commission. But Councilwoman Logan, your adoption as the city council makes them applicable in the city of Memphis. The county commission's adoption makes them applicable in unincorporated Shelby County. The joint adoption doesn't make them applicable in both jurisdictions, if that makes sense. So it's a joint adoption, but it is sort of a separate area of jurisdiction. So the city council's adoption makes it effective in the city of Memphis only. So if of any joint code, so whether it's the zoning code or the construction codes.
Construction is city, right?
Right, and then when the county commission adopts it, it's operable in the unincorporated area.
Same thing.
The same things, that's right. And so in large part, I think the idea around the joint division when it was established in the 1970s was really just economies of scale. If the two sides have a zoning department, why not share? If there's a joint, or if the two sides have a construction code enforcement department, why not just share that responsibility? But it's applicable in two different places. But those codes are the enforcement of the zoning codes and the construction codes is by and large done through the permitting process. So last year, for example, 2022, my division conducted over 120,000 inspections. Fewer than 8,000 were complaint-based enforcement inspections, meaning that over 112,000 were done through the normal course of the permit process. And so under the zoning code and under the construction code, what we are compelling property owners in City of Memphis and unincorporated Shelby County to do is if they're going to use their property or do any type of construction or repair on their property, that they must first get a permit to do so. And it is when they don't get a permit that our enforcement really comes into play. And so some of the examples that were on this environmental court list that I noticed were auto repair in a residential area. That's a zoning issue. Someone is using the property improperly. In a residential zoning district, you are allowed to do residential activities. You're not allowed to do commercial activities. And so that's why that's a complaint. It's not because it's a blight issue, it's because they're using their property in an incorrect manner without permission, a permit from the government. Same thing with mobile car wash. Councilwoman Logan, you and I talk about these too often. Those are not allowed in any random parking lot on any street. It's not that it's a blight issue, it's an issue that that property owner is using their property in an incorrect way without first having obtained a permit to do so. And so that when we send inspectors out on complaints for enforcement, that's really what we're trying to compel the owner to do. Either A, get a permit, or B, knock it off. And that's really it. And so, you know, a lot of times we have cases that we end up citing to environmental court, and they kind of sit and sit and sit and sit, and we get a little frustrated because the answer's, you know, it's black and white. Either get a permit or knock it off. Whereas I think what city code enforcement is doing is trying to enforce, maintain a standard of condition for property. And that can be a lot more of a complex. There's a lot more gray area when it comes to getting a property owner to maintain a condition of property. There are all of these different factors that Melanie went through a moment ago that, you know, whether it's education, responsibility, resources, that obviously plays a big part. That's all the gray area that I think property maintenance code deals with that we don't really have in our code, because our code says, you know, you're either allowed to do it or you're not allowed to do it, or you can either build in a certain way or you cannot build in a certain way. I think even if we went down the path of saying that there should be cooperation or potentially even consolidation of code enforcement activities, what we still cannot separate is those fundamental differences between the black and white of zoning and construction and the gray area of property maintenance. So in my mind, the issue has always been something else that Melanie talked about: information sharing. How do we better share the inputs that come in from the citizens so that we do the heavy lifting on the government side and don't make the citizen go through all, you know, the difficulties of finding the right door to make the right complaint. So we've transitioned to a new permit system within the last, we're going on 3 years now, where it's a web-based permit system. Anybody can submit permits online for any of our activities. Previously, we had construction code enforcement with its own permit system. You know, the land use department in planning and development just had a paper-based system. The City of Engineering was kind of doing its own thing. City Fire was sort of doing its own thing. All those departments have a role in the permit process, in the development process. And so what we said was, we need, as we transition to this sort of online permit system, you know, we need to think about how we have one place that someone enters for their project, and they can touch all of those departments in one system. So when we went live on it a couple of years ago, it was just planning and construction code, but now we also have engineering, we have fire. We're going to be adding the health department relatively soon for the purpose of being able to share work better across the permit process. And so might I suggest to you that, you know, the solution here is a better approach to sharing complaints as they come in, getting them to the right place on the back end. And so there is just, you know, one point of interaction with the citizen, but then once it comes into the government side, you know, we can sort of figure out better, you know, this is supposed to go here or there. And so rather than someone making a complaint to 311 to city code enforcement, the city code enforcement determines is a zoning issue or determines is a health department issue and closing it, they simply just route the issue over to us in the same system, and it gets resolved. The customer, or the citizen, sees that it gets resolved, and they don't have to figure out the minutia of whose code does what. So to me, I think that's probably the better place to begin this discussion. But I told you I was coming with opinions on this, so I'm happy to defend those in any way.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the education on it. It gives me a little bit more clarity. But however, I'm still stuck at the same place in that it still sounds like just another, the same concept of 311, where the constituent goes to one place, but you're saying add another layer of where they send it to, which is the county. And so, which is you guys.
Well,
or wherever it's supposed to go over on your side.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that there's one point of entry, and that information is shared across city and county agencies. So our permit system that we use is used by city agencies, it's used by county agencies, it's used by the Joint Division of Planning and Development, which is both a city and a county agency. And we don't really have any issues of jurisdiction being under one sort of technological umbrella. And quite frankly, I don't think we should have that problem with a 311 system either. It's just right now it's not set up that way. And so, I've kind of been baffled for a couple of years now why 311 won't give us zoning complaints, because we're not a county agency. We're a joint city and county agency. We should be able to take in city complaints, just as we can take in county complaints.
So a joint 311. Is that, but this is the thing. I still see like division heads. You still have layers on both sides, but wanting the staff that's doing the work to be collaborative, but it's still two separate entities instead of having one chain of kind of leadership, and then it flows out. It's still two separate things, but you're just wanting it to connect. And the problems we're having now is connecting within one system, the 311. We're having problems connecting there. Challenges. So you're asking to add on. I get what you're saying, but if we're not doing that, it's going to be hard. It's hard for me to understand that we can add on a whole nother division and then that smooths it out.
My suggestion is not necessarily add on, but reform what's already there. In terms of the system that's used for complaints, because I don't know that we can. I don't know that we can layer all of these activities into a single division, because I think we'd only have one division of government. So, for example, in the construction side, engineering manages construction in the public right-of-way, but that is directly connected to vertical construction of buildings on private property. And so when we have a development project that comes in, it has to involve planning, it has to involve engineering, it has to involve construction, it also has to involve the fire department, it has to involve the health department. Sometimes it involves public works if there's a sewer connection issue. So all of these different divisions are established with their sort of spheres of expertise for a reason. And so I think our job is to better connect across divisions so that we can leverage our individual spheres of expertise to better serve the citizens. But it wouldn't necessarily be, in my mind, an improvement to try to just collapse all of these activities under one. I mean, because I guess we kind of have that. It's the mayor. It's the one. So,
Okay.
and I would love to hear any feedback from others here.
Well, we have received all of the presentations. We do want to open up. You have a presentation as well? we're going to open up for comments and questions now that you've heard everything. And I wanted to make certain we were able to get all of the presentation out and all of the information out, because one thing may spark information, questions and thoughts and innovation from one person, something else may spark from someone else. So I wanted everybody to get the information out. Now that we have, some of you have, I'm sure, have questions, and we want to open the floor up for the questions and comments and thoughts, because we're going to take all of this information and have to compile it for recommendations. And we have some great information and opportunities, and we want to maximize the opportunity to bring forth the recommendations that are going to really make a difference and make change. I definitely want to hear from environmental enforcement. We didn't get to hear from you all the last time, but out of what you've heard today, I'm going to add that on, Liza, that without objection from anyone else, any problems or anything from anyone else. I just want to briefly, from the things that you have heard today, and while on the task force, is there anything that you can shed light on in terms of the approach that environmental court has, or any thoughts about the things that come before you? Have you all given any thought to it, or how we can make the process a little smoother or advance it, or any recommendations to us, to this body? Attorney Shaw.
To the extent that I have a certain amount of time, I would like to yield this. Sorry, John, y'all know I love throwing people under the bus. I would like to yield my time to John Cameron.
Okay.
He's the referee of environmental court and has been working in environmental court for, I think, about 16 years.
Okay, great. If you would come on down. You all play a huge part in this whole conversation. I don't like talking around people. I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak as well. If you could lend any thoughts or any recommendation to this body that we could, contemplate as we are gathering our thoughts for the recommendations.
And I think cooperation among agencies is key in all this. And I think what John said, it's rather than building a larger superstructure, just get the structures we have in place to talk more to each other. And I don't, there's a lot of new inspectors that I don't know. And over 16 years, I've seen people that come in and do their job, and I've seen people that are committed to the work of the job. And one thing that marks those people, whether they worked in construction code enforcement, whether they worked in housing code enforcement, is a commitment to solving problems and knowing whose responsibility it is, but not ending it because they don't see a particular IPMC problem right there. Something that Judge Potter did years and years ago was something called the E-team.
What team?
The E-team. Now, there's another E-team now that's something else entirely different. But the E-team was basically cross-trained inspector corps. There was a housing department inspector, there was a construction code enforcement inspector, health department inspector, and a fire code inspector. And they sort of were able to go, and this was actually before my time. This was before my time, but what they were able to do is on a particular property, let's say it's a large apartment complex or something that presented many different complicated issues, they could go in as a team and diagnose what separate sections of the code are being involved in so that nothing got left out, so that you didn't have to say, well, this is a construction code enforcement issue, but that thing over there is housing. A lot of times these problems don't present themselves in isolation. So I don't know that you would necessarily have to create another set of teams, but sort of emphasize and create a work environment where you're encouraged to have the problem solved, not check the box that this is over with. And I don't really know how you build that. I would think that Melanie would know more about how to do that than I would. But identifying people that are willing to do those types of things and getting them where they need to be. I think the idea of just sharing through one information, making sure that the county has access to it so that it's not closed out, or just having the inspector who goes out to field the complaint know that you have to be looking for things that go beyond just what your particular responsibility is.
And I'm sorry, I think I was more so talking about when it gets to environmental court or your input in this process. And as it relates to environmental court and the challenges that maybe code enforcement is facing or that they have, how can you all play a part, or what things on the horizon that you see that you are going to be doing different that can help expedite these things from getting from environmental court, to resolution?
Yeah, and I think a little more homework done on the front end would be really helpful.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Well, making sure that when I give a presentation, I have a little chart. It's 3 circles of who can be a defendant on an environmental court case. On a criminal case, if I get arrested because my twin brother broke into somebody's house, that case is just over with. On an environmental case, you can always substitute in the proper party because it's a civil violation. So the people that could be responsible on a given issue could be a leaseholder, it could be the owner, it could be someone who lives on the property who's the one causing the problems. And what we really want to do is get to the person who's most likely to get the problem solved. And, in certain cases, it's going to be better to have the landlord sided. In certain cases, it's going to be better to have the tenant sided. But when we get, someone who's just on the MLG&W record and it turns out they live in a house, I'll give a concrete example. A guy got cited to court because he was the MLG&W information party. The lights were in his name. And he hadn't lived there in 3 years. It was still in his name, but he lived in a trailer park in the county at that point. But he still, came to court eventually after he got notice from the people that did live in the property. Hey, you got a letter in here that says you missed court, for our junk in the yard, basically. So in that particular situation, just citing the owner to court in the first place would have been better. Rather than having to go through the steps of figuring out exactly which of the people living on this property are involved. But making sure that we get contact with the person who needs to get to court. That would help a lot. That way we're not having to send letters on, arguably whether the service is sufficient or not, and can really dig our teeth into it more. I can talk about this all day, but if you got specifics,
shorter substantive, I think, especially if you're making a robust request, Will actually did a really great presentation on this issue. Is the Tennessee constitutional change of what environmental court can and cannot do. So again, the best and most thing we can do is a $50 fine. And I think per Will's research, that has been the kind of money for since 18-something, Will.
Correct. It's the Constitution constrains those fines to $50. There are some ways to get creative with that as far as multiplying it by the number of days, like it's a violation every day. But when it's all said and done, you're constrained by that $50.
And that's actually been held up by the state Supreme Court and in case law. Now, what it does say is that you can assess penalties. Somehow a fine and a penalty, the Tennessee Supreme Court said, is a different thing. And that, in all cases, tends to work better for owners than for tenants. Most people don't come into environmental court from just the junk side of things because they got too much money. The question of enforcing those fines becomes a further conversation. There are ways to do it. They're really palatable for some people. They're less palatable for others.
Okay. Is there a timeline for certain cases being being ruled on or, being dealt with?
So, where there might be something looks like it's taking longer than at other times, might just be because there was never a signature on the citation in the first place. It was just posted on the property. So what can we do at that point? You can't issue a bench warrant for someone if you don't know that they signed that they even knew they were supposed to be in court. But there's some notice there, but and we try to be sparing in our use of bench warrants, but that is quick. It's just the question of how much stomach do you have for anybody who doesn't show up to court having a warrant issued for their arrest. So the court may send a letter. The court may even take a fine if they don't appear, especially if the problem's not being corrected. But this might go on for several months because the reality of it is it's with as many cases as we have, you can't just send a letter and say come next week. It's got to be slotted in the right place.
Okay.
But then other cases, generally, if and we're being a little more aggressive with our fining. But generally, if someone is making progress, then they're allowed a little more time to keep moving. But if progress regresses, a lot of times you have people that have junk on the property, and they may get rid of. We had one guy one time, and I had never seen as much stuff removed from one property and he had just a few things left. I said, just come back in a month. Next month it was worse than it was before.
Oh, wow.
The lesson there is apparently some drugs really make you productive, but
Okay.
so it's really hard to say, and a lot of times I always say if someone cuts you off in traffic and you see the back of the car, you get really frustrated, and then you get up to the front and you see it's a mom with 3 little kids or a grandmother, and all of a sudden you have a little more sympathy. And a lot of the times that can be the case in court, and it is a good thing to have input from the community, and that needs to go through to the prosecutors. It doesn't really need to come to the judge, and the prosecutors are the ones who are vigorously presenting the city's case. And so so that a lot of times the story we don't see is not the full story.
Yeah.
But a lot of times what the citizens see is not the full story either.
Yeah, okay. Only thing about that mom and them 3 kids in the car, you haven't seen all the people that she done caused wrecks just because she driving slow. Everybody on the street done had a wreck because she's slow, she can't see, she needs to be on the side. That's the only problem. That's where we are right now. We all praying for the little lady and her children, but she needs to get off the street and call an Uber or something. That's the problem we're having in our community right now in environmental court. And so I just wanted to give you all a space. That's why I wanted you all to be here, because all of us are part of the solution. And so I definitely agree with you. We have to have have compassion. There's a balance there. So just trying to understand that balance in this climate. It is such an unusual time in our city. And so, with the blight and all of that, and now the crime. And so it's just an issue. But I really appreciate that insight. I think we made some notes concerning some things that I didn't even know. Concerning the fine and the penalty. So I'm going to open up the floor now. Our time is slipping by. For any questions, you may have had a question or comment or a thought as people were presenting. Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you so much, Chair. My first question is, was there some discussion about having an additional court? Would that help by any chance if we had 2 environmental courts?
So right now we have 1 court with 2 referees and the judge. And we're in the process of moving all to 1 floor. For a lot of people don't realize this. For many years we had the 2nd floor courtroom and we had the 10th floor courtroom. We also have currently 3 community courts. We need a 4th. And it needs to be in Whitehaven. We were there for years, and
so additional courts may assist the problem. So that's something this board this group could recommend, additional courts if possible.
And once we get on the same floor, it's going to be a whole lot easier strategically to share the dockets that we currently have.
Okay, I understand. Like when issues come before the council, the fact that the whole neighborhood comes in with the issue and saying they're upset about it. My question is, if we start advising the neighbors to go to the hearings when these issues come up, would that in any way affect the way the judge might rule?
So, you know, it's interesting because for many, many years, prior to COVID, it was fairly common for large groups of neighborhood residents to show up. I would recommend, and this is what I just said earlier, that that communication needs to go to the prosecutors because they're the ones who present in the case. And they can look at a given situation and determine whether or not that's warranted, whether or not they want to offer any testimony. You know, it's not like something where we can really have or should have public comment.
Input.
And we should have input, but it shouldn't be going directly to the judge. It should be going to the persons who are presenting the case for the city or the county, whoever it happens to be in that particular case. You know, there can be a situation where things, especially on Will brings the Neighborhood Preservation Act cases, those get real complicated with getting receivers, with getting potential ownership issues cleared up. And if a neighborhood group was coming every week for that, they'd get bored real quick.
Let me ask you this.
I have one comment. And so as far as another environmental court submitted a proposal to city administration about this time last year in order to create a partnership between the Parks Commission and environmental court so that we moved all of our community courts, which are the courts that actually meet inside the community, inside the community centers. And so we can get 4 of those operating inside the community centers. So that we actually are, you know, people don't have to come to 201, they can come to a community center in their neighborhood.
And those are real good for the quick.
Yeah.
Get those,
That's fine.
get
We
things
can
Have his
turned around.
own referee, with his own referee at each one?
It wouldn't have, no, it'd be once a week. I could do them all.
I mean,
Okay.
it would be staffed, in other words, is what, yeah.
We've actually, we're at about half of the capacity that we used to have for those, and we need as many open as we possibly can. It used to be that we met in Frazier twice a month. We met, and it's actually really Raleigh Frazier.
Right, at Austin P.
Well, it's at Cunningham Community Center right now, right on the
Oh, you're at Cunningham.
128, 127 line. And
Okay.
And we've got about 20 to 30 cases one time a month. If I could get it open to where we could have it 2 times a month, if we could get Hickory Hill back to 2 times a month, and if we could get our Whitehaven location back open 2 times a month, we're in real good shape with that.
Okay, let me write that down. You said, so on the north side.
I can send over the written
Yes,
proposal. I
please
can
do.
email it.
Please do. Okay,
and-
that could be a part, but then that's not on our purview. Yeah, okay,
Okay, another
go ahead.
consideration. Would it be illegal once a case has been brought before you and it's taken some time to get resolved to post a sign in that property to say this case is being taken under advisement by environmental court, so people know you're doing what you can do. This is not being overlooked, but they need to be made aware. We get it all the time. We need some type of notification to the public that this is being worked on.
Now, so we have those on Neighborhood Preservation Act cases, don't we? So presently on a Neighborhood Preservation Act case, which 99.9% of them are vacant. There is a notice posted so that someone can see. Is that's still being done?
There's a yellow sign that is posted on that property's door. I've wondered about the more. I'm envisioning something like a yard sign.
You're right, that's what I want.
Repeat the question.
Okay, I asked them what was the feasibility and the legality of placing a sign in these lots where they have gone before environmental courts and it's taken an excessive amount of time to address, so the citizens and the neighbors in that neighborhood know. We're not disregarding your concerns.
Absolutely.
There are issues that we're trying to work out.
Mhm.
Here's the case number, so if they want to follow it, they can come down and watch it. But if that could be a requirement in the future.
I can't think of anything
Sarah?
legal or illegal about it.
That's what
Just,
I don't know,
it's
that's
an
why.
idea.
Comment about
Right.
that? Okay.
Yeah, it might be good, just sort of like a flag.
Right.
There was an example Innovate Memphis told us about maybe a year ago out of Baton Rouge, I think, where they actually put QR codes on the health strip between the sidewalk and the road, and that would, the citizen walking by could scan it, and it would send back to like a See Click Fix website that said, hey, this is working through code enforcement. It's in court next week. It would give status updates, just so you
QR
knew. It was a
code.
very visible way to tell citizens, hey, we know this is a problem.
Yeah.
So we always thought that was a good idea.
Good idea.
Anything else? I mean, I'm talking environmental court. Carlissa left. She's gonna call me up here. I got my listening closed and not my speaking closed.
No, you're fine. You're fine. QR code for abandoned. So that was QR code for abandoned properties.
I can send you more information. I can send mine more.
Please do. And you said a sign in the yard too for people that don't know about the QR code. Yeah.
Set up a notification so people will be able to see what's going on with this particular property.
Okay.
These ones that you can resolve overnight. You don't have to worry about over anything that's gonna change up.
Yeah, no, especially for something that's involving renovation or
Yeah,
something like that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times mention the Neighborhood Preservation Act, for example. This is a successful case.
Okay.
And it's in a very high value neighborhood. And now I think that property's finally been sold, but it sat there vacant for years and years and years. Suit was filed, but the ownership on this thing was about as complicated as you could possibly imagine. This on Carruthers, remember that one? And just finding someone to hold accountable. Now the law changed so that it actually made it a lot easier to deal with it. But under the old law, it was very difficult just for things like that. And that can occasionally come up in construction code cases, for example. You just got a vacant lot and it's really hard. It would be nice to get like a magic wand where we could just get it all cleaned up and put a lien on it. But
Before we get that magic wand, we're just gonna do these QR codes and this sign, and then we're gonna still work toward that wand because we got 1 million properties we need to get. But I appreciate that. That's some leeway. That's some things that we can do tangibly, and so we'll look to get that from you too, Sarah. I'm sorry. So, is there anybody else have any other questions for environmental court or comments? Thank you so much, and just stay around because something else may come up. All right. Anyone else? Any of the? We had our the communication and outreach presentation. Did anyone have any questions or comments for Director Neal? Go right ahead. I guess you and I are pretty much the ones having a.
They're
That's
gonna
fine.
tell you, Cheyenne asked questions.
Yes,
a lot of
absolutely.
questions. But this one is not a question, it's basically a comment. I think that the presentation that was made in regards to the purpose of your communication was very good.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that this committee comes up with a pilot project. Let's pick a particular area or areas and just focus in on trying to do everything we can to clean it up. For example, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water said they are now beginning to install the new lights. They need to install it in those areas, make sure that's a priority. Then we also had a situation where cameras are still available. Let's put the cameras out. Then we're gonna send flyers in that particular neighborhood. Say, let's clean this area up, okay? That's just one idea. The other idea was similar to what the state did in regards was October the cleanup month for this past year from the state. They came down and said, let's clean up the whole state in October. Let's have a cleanup month for the whole
City.
city. And everybody we know involved with city activities. We talked about Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. Maybe they won't open the envelope, but let them stamp something on the outside of that envelope saying, let's clean up Memphis.
Or
you didn't
QR
have
code.
to open it, you just need to receive it.
Code on the outside of the envelope would be good too. Yeah.
You know, and we can implement a lot of those other initiatives that you spoke about in regards to how you make people aware. Make sure the school system know this month we're gonna talk about litter. Everybody, the whole city, we need to try to reach as many people that we have some type of interest in, a controller can touch.
Yeah.
I said, this month, please talk about cleaning up and making this city pretty, you know? So that's a thought too.
So actually, I just want to clarify so we can write it down as an action item and a recommendation. Actually rolling out the comprehensive plan for two small areas, maybe one in the north and one in the south, where we concentrate all of these efforts as a pilot on both sides. Okay.
And then part two, or we could just have a general month of cleaning up where we make contacts with everybody we know and ask them to support this, implement it in some way in your organization, any business venture. Even John could probably put some on his permits. Make sure you keep it clean. I mean, everybody talks about cleaning up. I don't care who you are. Put that on your literature that you send out this month. Let's clean up this city. Now, the other thing I had was, we talked about the dumping. Who was dealing with the dumping? Did he leave? No, it was you. Somebody had. I think that's a fantastic recommendation, but we need more free dumping sites. People will dump if the site, so we really need to generate and ask for as many more free dumping sites as possible. I think you may have talked about the sites. Just the one is, right, just one is not working. We need more. And people will, I think, help. Your contractors and everybody would help if they were close in the city. That's the problem. I'm talking to contractors, but Collins still seems to be a problem. I said, so where are you taking it? They wouldn't tell me.
So at Collins, they're not going to Collins Yard?
It's too far from some of them.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I think,
Yeah. Okay. But we are going to make a note of that. Anyone else have anything on the communications? I think this is it was an excellent presentation and noted all of the points of opportunity for us. And if we can and all of us have had the discussion in different, at different times. And so pulling it all together, I think is going to really move the needle in getting some of this done and building a collaboration that will be sustainable, where the cleanup will be sustainable. This is what's needed. So, and it kind of goes back. What you were sharing is kind of what my sentiments were in speaking about combining, and so maybe not combining city and county, but efforts and shared information and how we process things. I think that's going to be key, which I'm fine with as long as it works. However you want to set it up, as long as it works. And it's not going to work if everybody's divided and, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So Director Zena has committed to leading the Calvary in bringing this to fruition, and everyone here has witnessed it, and we all are on board with him. We're going to be praying for him. I'm going to send a notice out to all the churches to put him on the prayer list so he can get this done, okay?
I'm not coming to any more of these meetings.
This is only the beginning to a cleaner, fresher Memphis. We're going to be back on the list as the most beautiful city. Might still be working on our crime, but we're going to be beautiful and clean. That's not going to be a worry on people's minds. It's enough to think about than to worry about litter. Okay, so what I do want to say is, as you know, we've had some things that happened since we started this task force. There were a lot of things that have happened in our city that kind of, took precedence over the conversation. And so I would ask that we have one more brief meeting to just compile. We're going to compile them, and I would like for you to send me your recommendation. I want you to send me a written recommendation from yourself as to what you would like to see on the list of recommendations. I think when we did the public safety, we had like 20 recommendations that we gave to the council. I would like for each one of you to give me your recommendations. We will compile those recommendations, and if we could kind of categorize them as to internal recommendations and external recommendations. And then if, or if you want to, and it could be blight or illegal dumping. but internal and external, because there's some wonderful things that we need to do internally, and there are some wonderful ideas that came about what we need to do externally. And I think if you give me, give at least one in each one, we'll compile those. When we come back, the only thing we'll have to do is vote on which ones will move forward, and then we'll present to council the second meeting in March. The recommendation is March 16th at 3:30 for this brief meeting to vote. Oh, my phone is dead. No.
You're free.
Okay, and we come in, we'll send them to you ahead of time, so when we come, we just vote, and if you all, is that spring break? Yes. That's spring break. Yeah, that's spring break. Okay, so we'll send out the dates, a couple of days for you to pick from, because I have a 10-year-old and spring break is not gonna work. She's already sitting in the office, like, probably having a fit. But because we did kind of have to divert our attention and cancel some of the meetings, so I know this has been long, but it's worth it. If we can just get to the finish line, we'll be okay. So we'll give you all one other date, when is the last meeting? The date for the meeting in March?
The 21st.
The 21st?
The next meeting is April 7th.
Okay, so we'll look on the calendar and pick a date. Spring break is in there, that's kind of throwing us off. So we may have to meet on the 23rd and then present the first meeting in April, present to the council. So just consider that, look at your schedules, make sure that's open, and please, as soon as possible, if you could go ahead while all this information is fresh on your mind, if you could go back and if you need to listen to the past meetings or look at your notes, just go ahead, if you can, within the next week or 7 to 10 days, send your 2 recommendations, at least 2, a minimum of 2, but Janet, I didn't see you back there. Did you have any questions, comments, or anything? Okay. So, especially those that are in the education sector, I do like what Councilwoman Johnson said about once we get these recommendations, we can look at, launching a comprehensive plan in the north and the south. So we'll talk about that as well. So just be 2 things, vote and then how to roll it out. So we'll do those and we'll send them to you. Any other questions? Thank y'all for so much information. I really feel good about where we're going and the collaboration that we all are starting even here now. So if you don't have any further questions or business before this committee, this